Democrat Ro Khanna says his party is willing to compromise on immigration policies, but Republicans aren't. Joining me now, Congressman Ro Khanna, who is notably live in New Hampshire, key 2024 primary state this morning. Congressman, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you, Shannon. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms watching today.
Yes, and blessings to them. Okay, let's start with the border. This week marked the highest recorded number of people showing up illegally at the border. By the end of the week, it was 82,000 people recorded so far. National Review points the finger at your party, saying this: Democrats made this mess themselves. They dismantled the policies that the Trump administration had used to get a handle on the problem. At the border this week, Senator Ted Cruz said this.
I have to say I am angry because this is deliberate. This is a decision that was made by President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and congressional Democrats to open up the border to what is nothing less than an invasion.
So President Biden did get rid of Trump-era policies that he called inhumane. You heard what Congressman Donald said, that that's an easy way to label things that were actually working in his estimation. But nothing got done in this administration, the first couple of years of Democrats controlling the White House and both houses of Congress. So who owns this chaos now at the border?
Shannon, nothing has gotten done since President Reagan signed bipartisan immigration reform in 1986. And instead of throwing fingers at each other, why don't we come together on some common principles? We need a safe and secure border, and we need an orderly and humane process. That means Congress needs to act. We need to provide the money to have judges there and to have immigration officers so that we can actually be quickly processing the claims. The president is saying that these claims should be processed in hours. People who aren't legitimate should be sent back. We need to have more money for Border Patrol, which, by the way, the House has passed under Democratic leadership 2 years ago. The Republicans didn't vote for that. But why not come up with a bipartisan solution? That's what I want.
Well, is there anything that you could work with Republicans? Because a lot of those things, ramping up immigration personnel, border agents, those kinds of things are included. They say that you got to secure the border before you can do anything else. They have things included in their bill as, you know, E-Verify as well, that all employers would have a database to make sure they're hiring people who are here legally. Are you opposed to that?
Their bill is extreme. Even the Senate won't pass their bill. I mean, their bill takes away funding from any of the NGOs in El Paso. You talk to Veronica Escobar, who represents that area. Why wouldn't we want NGOs giving water to people coming across or helping deal with the situation on the border? Their bill is for a border wall. That is not something Democrats can or will support. But we will support increased funding for Border Patrol. We will support increased funding for immigration judges to quickly process things. We will support better technology and security on the border. So why not come up with a compromise there? And the president, by the way, is doing everything he can to reverse the catch and release. You have border agents now and judges quickly calling people who are coming at the border within hours, and many of the folks who don't have legitimate claims aren't being allowed in.
So just a couple of recent Fox polls on this, on how the president's doing on the issue of immigration. 36% approval, 61% disapproval, and how he's treating illegal immigrants who show up. 9% say too tough. 60%, the overwhelming majority in this poll, say not tough enough. So whatever this administration is doing, voters out there do not think it's effective. They lay this at the president's feet.
They understand that there is the border crisis right now in terms of people not being treated in an orderly, safe, and humane process. But the problem is often with Congress. I mean, we have not provided the administration with the resources for the immigration judges or processing. We have not provided the resources for Border Patrol. We have not provided the resources for securing the border. And I don't believe this is either a Democratic or Republican issue. It's a both-party issue. I mean, President Reagan is the last president who's gotten this done. And since then, we've had no bipartisan agreement. So the question I have for Representative Donaldson or others is, do you want to just score political points, or do you want to actually work, compromise, and get something done? Well, I want to get something done.
Listen to the two of you. It sounds like there are some nuggets there that you do agree on, and so we wish you luck on doing that. In the meantime, there were a number of GOP senators who went to the border. They're back here in D.C. talking about the issue of the fentanyl crisis. Here's what they had to say.
Joe Biden doesn't give a damn about Americans. And why would I say that? 70,000 Americans died of fentanyl overdose. Why? Joe Biden doesn't care. He has a completely open border.
President Biden could use this health crisis of fentanyl poisonings to implement Title 42. He could do that today.
I believe it's GOP Senator Bill Hagerty who's got a proposal legislatively to give the power to the president to do this, to trigger Title 42 with fentanyl as the health crisis. Would you support that?
Shannon, first of all, the exact problem with politics is what Senator Scott said. I mean, come on. President Biden doesn't give a damn about Americans. Here's someone who has dedicated his entire life to public service. I would never say that about President Trump. I would not say that he doesn't care about Americans. So why don't we actually deal with the issues instead of these ad hominem attacks on our presidents? Of course I would support stronger policy to get fentanyl out of America. I'm concerned about China that's been shipping it. It's wrong. I've heard the testimony in Congress of mothers who've lost their children. And let's solve that. I mean, instead of launching ad hominem attacks at the president.
Okay, let's do a little bit of a lightning round to get to a couple of other things. The debt ceiling. There is a call by the White House for a clean debt ceiling. There are enough senators, Republicans, who say that's not going to happen. They won't vote for a clean debt ceiling. It's filibuster proof there. The Federalist, though, is summing up the idea that you can't use the debt ceiling as a negotiating tack this way. That says if the debt ceiling is mechanically lifted without any debate over spending, then it doesn't really exist. If you want to spend without any limit, just say so. What do you say?
We say that we should pay our bills, but we are open and believe there need to be cuts in the deficit. And here's how Democrats would do it. We would increase taxes on the wealthy. We would make sure that billionaires had to pay at least a 25% minimum tax. We would make sure that there were strategic cuts in defense spending. We would end the cap on Social Security and have taxes and have taxes over $250,000 on Social Security. We have a proposal. We just want to first pay our bills before implementing our proposal.
Okay, let me touch on this as well, because you also sit on Oversight Committee. The bank transactions that were outlined by Republicans this week, raising questions about Hunter Biden, what work he was doing, and why people, as you heard Congressman Donald say, like grandchildren, were getting paid. More questions than answers for a lot of folks right now. But here's something else that Congressman Donald said this week.
Whenever there was like this many companies just laying all over the place, and you see wire transfers and cashier checks over here going to random members of the family for no apparent purpose at the size and velocity at which all of this was being conducted, the only logical conclusion of a financial professional is you are concealing money.
Do you have any curiosity, any questions about those transactions?
Well, Steve Doocy from Fox himself asked, he said, there's no evidence of anything illegal and there's no evidence of anything that ties it to President Biden. I wish the House Oversight Committee would spend more time worrying about the ordinary income of Americans going up than they are worried about the income of Hunter Biden.
So no questions.
And I guess well, I do have, here's my point. There is a U.S. attorney that President Trump appointed that is charged to look into all of this. And I have confidence in him. When he comes out with something, I'm not going to question it. But why are we wasting our time politicizing this in Congress? Let him do his job. He's a Trump appointee. He has full authority. He can look into all of this. I'm not going to question the facts. Let him do it, and then let's agree to his process.